Welcome back to the Gruber Morning Show. I'm Pete Gruber.
I'm Mark Schaffner. Good morning and welcome to our Thursday broadcast.
And we've got a number of things to cover today. And again, if you have any questions, post them. People like to see where our audience is coming in from. So if you're from someplace other than the U.S. or even in the U.S., tell us where you're from. And we can see what platform you're coming in on. We stream on a number of them. And yeah. So one of the things we wanted to lead with this morning is the 3 Chinese Roadsters. It's always been a hot topic. The whole world seems to know about those. And we are going to take the second one out of a sea container this morning. We're taking VIN 1107, which is the radiant red, and which has some rodent activity. We're going to take it outside, jack it up, and pressure wash the bottom of the cavity to get rid of some of the rodent droppings and some of the residue that was left by these Chinese mice, rodents, rats, whatever they were. From there, we're going to button that one back up. We're going to take a look at the second Roadster that's coming out of the sea container. The first one did not have the service plug pulled, which is it's a switch basically on the main battery pack that would have disconnected it from any current drain whatsoever. And no one really believed that 13 years of cell storage would have resulted in any life in those cells, but we didn't know for sure. So we're hoping that at least one of those 3 Roadsters will have a pulled service plug, which would have been a sensible thing to do if you're shipping it from the U.S. all the way to China, because you can never guarantee how long these cars sit in sea containers on the boats and waiting to unload, especially during hurricane season. We noticed that there were a lot of delays. And we actually had a Roadster 2 years ago that was going from Palo Alto to Israel, and sadly enough, it got bricked on the way over. It was dead when it arrived and required quite a bit of maintenance.
Yeah, I wish that the service plugs could have been pulled. I'm not very hopeful. My thinking is if one wasn't pulled, they all came straight from Tesla. Probably it's going to be the same on all 3. But, you never know. You never know. Looking forward to seeing what the next one looks like.
Absolutely.
I know that we had a couple of comments on Facebook from some of our postings, and there's one that I really like in particular. And it says, we should display them in or near the front lobbies of the other U.S. automakers. I think it'd be a great idea. Just you drive one up and display it in front of the Ford headquarters, and another one in front of the GM headquarters, and a third one in front of Stellantis. And, you might take that dirty skid plate and send it to the UAW, since that's...
Doing that would also clearly remind people who started the EV revolution.
Right.
Put one in front of GM and, have Mary explain how this Roadster was, got there. But the final part of that comment that you mentioned was one that really intrigued me. It said, to help them wake the hell up.
Yes. Yeah, General Motors, Elon forever owes a debt to General Motors. They destroyed the EV1.
Yeah. The rest of the story regarding these Chinese Roadsters is we hope to be done with that within the next couple weeks or so. Fully disposition the cars, take a lot of pictures, and then decide what kind of repairs we're going to do, and then let the bidding start again.
Right, most definitely. If I remember right, our current highest valid bid is $750,000 for all 3. We had the $2 million bid for a while, but that person pulled out because of insurance issues. Basically, the insurance company said, "Yeah, we're not going to insure a car that's more than 10 years old that you want to lease out as a rental car."
And the reason we think that there will be a new round of bidding once these cars are properly dispositioned, documented, certified, woken up, mileage confirmed, and all that, is that we had a number of bidders early on that were interested but not willing to bid because it was sight unseen. These were in sea containers in China.
Right.
And the concerns were, would it be difficult getting them out of China? What kind of customs fees might be involved? Have the storage charges for 13 years really been relieved, and will they be relinquished, from the dock? All of that is solved now. They're here. They're at Gruber Motor Company, the premier Roadster repair organization, and they're going to be fully certified and lots of pictures taken. And so anybody interested in buying them, I think will feel a lot more comfortable the second go around.
Yeah, I think so as well. In fact, other than the rodent damage, and that's really minor damage in all truthfulness.
Yes, yeah. I mean, it would be different if they got inside the cabin, the carpet got soaked, those kinds of things, because that's difficult to remove and to eradicate.
Yeah.
But this was in the drivetrain portions underneath the car, where you've got a lot of metal. And again, once these are pressure washed, we think they're going to look and gleam like new cars again.
Yeah, so the fact that there's really just that minor damage, if somebody wants that car, goodness sakes, they'll put it in line for a new battery pack, and they have a brand new Tesla Roadster with an 80 kilowatt battery pack.
Mm-hmm.
So it's going to be a good deal, and there will be people that bid, I think, on all three, and I'm hoping on all three.
Looks like YouTube. We've got RC Robinson-San chiming in. He said, upvoted Sandusky, Ohio. Well, thanks for joining us.
Yes, welcome back. Glad to have you on this morning.
So we've got some news about the UAW strike that we should probably cover, because it does play into the future of EVs. In fact, if anything, it improves that picture for rapid adoption,
Oh, it sure does.
And anyway, Elon Musk apparently weighed in and shared a warning to the UAW, saying that these demands not could, but would push GM, Ford, and Chrysler into the fast lane toward bankruptcy. And I think they left out Stellantis, or Chrysler is Stellantis these days.
Chrysler is Stellantis.
All right.
I totally agree with Elon's point there. Imagine this scenario. You've got the president of the United States. He works with Congress, and he pushes through this law that helps to reduce inflation and moderate costs and stuff, because we've had a lot of inflation. And then he goes out and he lobbies with a labor group to get a large section of workers, hundreds of thousands of workers, like this 40% raise.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's happening, isn't it?
Yeah. We've got a picture to throw up, Jesse. If you want to throw up that meme, this is, one of those life's ironies that you just shake your head and say, what were they thinking? Do I need to get out of the way so they can see it?
There we go.
So let's let our audience digest that for a moment. And it does have some hypocrisy involved here. First of all, the statement months ago where, our president praised Mary Barra, GM, for electrifying the entire automobile industry. And of course, he added, "I'm serious," which of course was blatantly incorrect. And he was called out on it. We got so excited, we even did a video. And I was gentle. I said, I don't think it was Joe. I think he's got lousy script writers, and these guys need to be fired, and he needs to get some better script writers. Any of you interested, by the way, it's a kind of a tongue-in-cheek video out on our YouTube channel, and you'll probably see a picture of President Biden on the thumbnail. And then, of course, you have on the other half of that meme, "You deserve the significant raise you need." Well, again, we're getting back to, who created this problem with the raise? Anyway, we try not to politicize these podcasts too much, but this was definitely a head shaker for us.
Well, it really is a head shaker. I mean, if you think back, the office of the President of the United States has typically been the neutral moderator in labor disputes that get really serious and turn long term.
Mm-hmm.
So to see early on in the labor dispute in this case, not late after the parties have had a hard time negotiating, that person who is in that office come in and just soundly go on one side of the argument instead of the other.
Right.
You had a great comment about that pre-show.
Actually, Sawyer Merritt is what prompted this comment on Twitter. He said, and he has a picture of President Biden with a megaphone in front of the audience there and with a bunch of UAW people behind him, obviously supporting the cause. So here's what Sawyer says. He says, I believe that when Biden said UAW members should get a 40% raise, that he didn't fully understand the negative consequences of this decision. What kind of negative consequences it would have on GM, Ford, and Stellantis. If these automotive companies end up going bankrupt as a result, it could mean that no UAW member will have a job anymore. All right. So I ran with that, and my comment to that was, LOL, this reminds me of a couple at a marriage counseling session, only to find that the therapist suddenly takes sides with one of the parties.
Yeah.
Again, my take on the leader of the free world or any of these influential people is as role of mediator, not taking sides, obviously. And then I said, the ultimate irony is they may need a sensible raise only because of this administration's out-of-control deficit spending fueling inflation like we've not seen in some time.
I mean, the last time we saw inflation like this was back in the Jimmy Carter administration.
Mm-hmm.
It's perfect on point. The office of the presidency, in my opinion, deserves to be respected more than it is being respected by our current president.
Yeah.
And I'll leave my comments at that because I don't want to get too political, but I am really disappointed in what I saw there.
Yeah. Again, mediating, arbitration, bringing the two sides together, but certainly not taking, sides like this. So anyway, our thoughts on that. All right.
Well, we have a question from YouTube. TM joins us and says, question, guys. Have you seen a Model S with a remanufactured drive unit? Why did Tesla use single gaskets? My 2013 Model S drive unit was replaced under warranty at 90,000 miles, and now at 120,000 with a gasket has a gasket leak.
We don't understand the reasons that Tesla did a particular design on these drive units. The gaskets were definitely a problem. And the spirited driving at times actually pushed fluid past the gasket and compromised it.
Mm-hmm.
But what any manufacturer does, once they realize they have a problem, and that's pretty apparent because these things are going to service centers under warranty,
right?
These things get sent back to corporate. They get sent back for reverse engineering, re-engineering, and eventually they get it right.
Mm-hmm.
So the reasons for going with that in the first place, no one knows. We don't know. But they are making it right.
Yeah, and I know that we've seen in our past at Gruber Motors where we've replaced drive units. And the worst case is when a drive unit gets so filled with the coolant
mm-hmm.
that gets pushed into it that the drive unit starts to short electrically.
Yeah.
And then you have a car that you're driving down the road, and the next thing you know, you get this warning message, car is powering down, and
mm-hmm.
you barely have time to pull over to the side of the road.
Yeah.
But they are repairable problems, and I know that Tesla is trying to work to address that.
Yeah. And then there are unrepairable problems, like when the inverter gets soaked badly, that coolant is somewhat conductive, and it creates corrosion, and then you have to replace the electronics.
Right.
And if it gets into the motor, you have similar issues. But yeah, so we do not know the reasons, but thankfully everything is getting repaired, fixed, and updated, and a better design. All right. I think we've gotten through some of the topics here.
Yes. I noticed on the news that Tesla's Shanghai factory produced its 2 millionth car recently. And I did a little bit of looking up on that particular one. Shanghai Tesla started building in December 2018, and they started production in December 2019. So that to me, okay, there's your first clue that there are more businesses that may end up going to China just because they have so much less red tape to deal with.
Right.
But it took 2 years and 9 months, or 33 months, for Tesla to produce its 1 millionth car at that factory. And now 13 months later, they've produced car number 2 million. Wow. I mean, that's like a twofold improvement in time.
I was going to say, what's the rate of increase on that? That's pretty significant.
Yeah, it's about 150% rate increase in the terms of time, and and it made me think of, okay, you remember how Elon talked about in 2030 he believes Tesla's going to be putting out 20 million cars a year by 2030.
Right.
So what does that look like? They have 6 factories currently. They're going to be opening Giga Mexico, which is the 7th factory. They have one other factory on the drawing board, location to be determined.
Right.
They haven't determined if it's going to be Italy or Spain or India or somewhere else. There have been rumors about other places too. So let's say there might be even 2 factories rather than just one. Another factory that comes online about 2030. That's 9 factories. Every factory is going to have to produce roughly 2.25 million cars in 2030 if Tesla's going to meet its goal.
Right.
And I know they talked about Giga Mexico being the biggest factory of them all, producing almost 4 million cars a year by itself. Even if that's the case, the other 8 factories have to produce at least 2 million cars a year each. So the fact that Shanghai is producing 1 million cars in 13 months, they're going to have to get with it if they're going to meet their 2030 deadline.
Right.
But the fact is they will. There's room to grow in Shanghai. There's room to grow in Berlin. There's room to grow in Austin.
They're already expanding Berlin, I think, or trying to.
They're trying to expand Berlin. Yeah. That's exactly right. So I just see this as Tesla is simply doing what they said they would do. They're simply working to achieve their strategic goals. And I think within a couple of years, you're going to see Shanghai putting out 1 million cars every 6 months.
You know, I don't know this, and I probably should, but are any of these factories running more than one shift currently?
I don't know.
You think they should run 24 hours?
Well, you know, typically what happens is we have a lot of large high-tech industry here in the state of Arizona. You know, Motorola, Intel, Sperry, Digital at one point in time, now TSMC. And when you have a finite amount of real estate that you can do this type of manufacturing or production in, and you reach some level of saturation, you go to second shift. Now you've doubled. You go to 3 shifts within the same facility.
I think there is room to do some of that. I don't know for sure what if they're truly running 24/7, if they're running all out shifts. I get the feeling that they're not yet. They're in growth mode, trying to figure out the best way to do the production, the most efficient way, the best blend of robots and human labor.
Right.
To get. Once they have that blend completely down, then they can say, okay, we're going to switch this up, and instead of 1 shift, we're going to go to 2, or instead of 2 shifts, we're going to go to 3 and 24 hour, full 24 hours. And that right there could be enough for them if they're doing 1 million cars a year right now, and they're only 1 shift. But I don't know if they're 1 shift or not.
Right. Looks like we have a number of people joining us here. Niles is with us from Denmark. Niles, first of all, thank you for that wonderful email. And we finally got a visual. You're standing by a beautiful BMW motorcycle. I know those are very popular in Europe. And thank you for those links as well and your suggestions. He says, I think the 70s inflation was caused by Nixon when he couldn't pay for the Vietnam War. Carter, Volcker, helped overcome that inflation. Well,
if I remember correctly, the real stagflation that occurred, the really high inflationary rates that occurred, actually didn't occur until between 1978 and 1982. That would be the times, if you remember, that you had the interest rates were jacked up, went up to 18% or something like that. And that was Paul Volcker as the head of the Federal Reserve. But Paul Volcker if I remember correctly, now I'm dating myself. I was pretty young at that time, so this is me having to look back. Paul Volcker was actually appointed by Ronald Reagan when he was elected in 1980.
Oh, okay.
And Carter was the one who was trying to get ahead of the inflation by spending more.
Yeah.
It was and Ronald Reagan with his Keynesian economic theory, which was kind of the trickle down theory of economics.
Yeah, I remember that term. Yeah.
That was an institution or a change that Reagan brought into the political spectrum, and Volcker said, "We're going to have to fight this inflation. We're going to have to do whatever it takes to get the inflation rate back down. It's not sustainable." And so I believe he's the one that led the Fed to ratchet up the interest rates until inflation came down, and then brought them down, and that's why we had that really deep recession in the 1982, 1983 period.
Right. You know, that was in the middle of when I started these businesses, and I probably wasn't paying attention to the danger signals in the economy at the time. Thank you, Niles, for chiming in. YouTube TM says, having QC Charge local in San Diego rebuild it and put it in triple gasket and drain. Thanks. Oh, QC Charge, yeah, company in California that that has been doing great work with the drivetrains, Tesla drivetrains, and has access to the seals. And yeah, let us know how that works out for you, TM.
That would be a great one to do. That triple gasket technology is going to be superior to the single to what Tesla puts in right now. YouTube Crunch to Grace Hopper says, "Good morning, gents. Like number 9 from SoCal." So Crunch, as I know you would probably say and didn't this time, smash that like button, guys. That helps us with our subscriptions and helps us with the video to get seen.
And it helps Jesse get more cameras when we need them.
That's right.
YouTube, PYGKLB, good morning from damp Western Oregon. Thanks for joining us. And this one I'm going to let you address. Niles is chiming in again.
Yeah, Niles did talk. This is about the economy back in the 70s and 80s. He says, yes, that's when it topped because they didn't initially raise the rates enough. It started in 71 when Nixon left the gold standard. I think the dollar dropped about 40 to 50%. Niles, I do remember coming off the gold standard, so you may be right there, and that's something that I'll do a little bit of economic history research because I get fascinated by this stuff. So
I know that, yeah.
As always, you have great comments, Niles.
Mark, I was watching some videos the other day on the correlation between getting off the gold standard and just the way that the dollar is valued at this point. There's a huge I would just say look into the correlation between wages and cost of living as it relates to the gold standard being taken off.
I will definitely do that. I know that the U.S. dollar was pegged to the price of gold, and that's why Fort Knox was such an important part of our economy, because every dollar that was printed had to be backed by an equivalent amount of gold bullion, and Fort Knox is where all the gold bullion was stored. It's an interesting economic theory, and I know that there's a lot of good stuff to unpack there.
So getting back to some Tesla news, it turns out that Tesla has revealed that that once Cybertruck production is ramped up at Giga Texas, they will have over 60,000 employees there. They have 20,000 on the site currently, according to a public presentation by Jason Shahan, who is Tesla's director of manufacturing at Giga Texas. When I said this earlier to Mark, he said, boy, do you think that California regrets all those regulations and having Elon get annoyed and move everything to Texas?
Exactly. You know, the average rate for the people working at Giga Austin in Texas is about $118,000 a year. It comes up to somewhere around $59 an hour. And so, heck yeah, there's no community in the United States that wouldn't want an employee wage base of 60,000 people, where every one of those 60,000 people is bringing home $120,000 a
Six
year
figures.
or more.
Yeah, 6 figures. You're right. It helps the economy. It helps the municipalities they live in. Real estate begins to climb, and then of course eventually it turns into California. But it'll take a while.
It will. Well, I found another take on this article from Teslarati. Well, that's one of our favorite sources for news, and they dropped another really cool nugget of information as part of this. It had nothing to do with 60,000 people or wages, and it said there Giga Texas is installing a melt center so that they can recycle not only all the casting scraps for the GigaCast,
Sure.
but also all of the old aluminum wheels that they might be getting, that they're getting back.
Mhm.
They're actually going to become a major aluminum remanufacturing facility or recycling facility in Texas, and they will use that recycled aluminum for some of the front end castings and stuff like that in the new cars.
Fascinating.
I think that's fabulous.
Yeah, recycling, repurposing. That's music to my ears. They also say that at the end of 2022, last year, Tesla had 12,300 employees at Giga Texas. And then coming into 2023, Sean said that Tesla didn't have enough parking for workers. So to fix the issue, the company is now building a parking garage near the factory, hopefully a multi-story type arrangement so they can maximize the footprint.
Yeah, I mean, if they've gone from 12,000 employees and they're hoping to go to 60, wow, I can definitely see potential even of some sort of Giga Berlin style mass transit being put into Austin.
And so for any of the states curious what the impact is when having a large company like this come into your state and invest, they say that Tesla has become one of the largest employers in Central Texas, ranking only behind a grocery chain, HEBLP, never heard of them, by the way, which earlier this year employed 22,955 people in Metro, according to ABJ List Research. For a full article on any of this, it's in the Austin Business Journal, and you can Google that and get some more information.
Yeah, that's great information. I think about here in Arizona where, when the 2008 recession hit, we were particularly hard hit because we were building houses to bring people in who were hired to build houses. It was kind of feeding on itself, and that's what, kind of the definition of a bubble. Now we've got Intel, we have biotechnology, we have TSMC, just Intel and TSMC are investing close to $70 billion in infrastructure, and the jobs they're going to bring in, tens of thousands of jobs. Intel's been in the Phoenix metro area, obviously, for decades. But Intel is almost as big in Phoenix now once their new fabrication plant opens as they are in Portland, Oregon, which has been typically their corporate headquarters.
Interesting. I understand there's a Facebook facility, too, that I think is becoming one of our customers, a data center.
Yes. Yeah, so it's exciting, and here we love seeing that. I can just bet that Austin is thrilled.
Totally. You had some Rivian news.
I did. The first, RJ Scaringe came out after being asked about the Cybertruck versus the Rivian R1T. And essentially the question was, are you scared about what the Cybertruck is going to mean in terms of competition? And his short answer was, not in your life. Essentially, what RJ Scaringe said is there is so much business coming up for electric vehicles. We believe that the Rivian R1T and the Cybertruck are almost completely different markets. There's going to be very little overlap between the two of them. And so he really has this abundance mentality, is what I've heard it called before, where the idea is there is so much out there that everybody's going to get everything that they want. All they have to do is just work hard.
Amazing.
It really is.
A couple nights ago, I was driving home, test driving a Roadster, and we have a we have a Rivian service center that's not too far from us, about a mile east of here, sales and service actually. And so anyway, I saw a Rivian pickup truck in front of me at the light, and we were both taking a right. He must have seen me in the side view mirror, because as soon as he took that right, suddenly that thing was gone like a scalded cat, as Sandy would say. Those things are fast and completely silent. Usually when you see that performance of speed, there's a lot of noise involved.
Oh,
you know?
yeah. Oh, yeah.
Exhaust and tires squealing and all that. This thing just, I mean, it was gone. But yeah, it's an interesting company, and I understand that the stock is beginning to percolate a little bit because of some potential news.
Well, it is, and we're getting close to the end of the third quarter, and there's starting to get to be a lot of buzz building, not only on Rivian but on some of the other EV makers as well. This quarter, more than any other that I've seen in the last year and a half or so, is going to be about the deliveries. Are these automakers finally making their deliveries, or are they not? So here's a little bit of it for Rivian. Analysts are pretty bullish. It's come out in the news in the last couple days that Rivian is going to at least meet its quarter 3 deliveries, and probably will beat expectations. So Rivian stock is starting to percolate. It was up yesterday. It's up so far today. It was up a little bit on Tuesday when the news came out. Tesla analysts are very cautious right now. They want to see Tesla's deliveries continue to go up. And if you remember, in quarter 2, Tesla did about 467,000 cars. Analysts are really hoping that Tesla will at least meet that, and they would like to see them deliver about 473. That's kind of their expectation. But Tesla gave that warning in their investor call after the second quarter, where they said, hey, we're going to be retooling some of our factories, so our deliveries probably are not going to be up. They're probably going to be down. And so right now, those end of quarter 2 investor call comments have got people kind of skittish, and that means Tesla stock is just kind of holding. You see good news, you see those warnings, and so people don't know what they're going to do. However, if Tesla misses the analyst estimates, which are not necessarily real, but they are what they are, you'll probably see Tesla stock go down as the fourth quarter gets going and the announcements made. Lucid, I was surprised. I took a lot of time to look about what kind of chatter is going on about the Lucid deliveries. There's none.
Really?
The last thing that's in the press about Lucid and the number of cars they're making or the number of cars they're delivering was about the quarter 2 numbers and how they were disappointing compared to quarter 1 because they were the same. Nothing in the press yet about quarter 3. What is in the press, though, is that Lucid's making the news because they have finished and opened their first Saudi Arabia factory. This is kind of a surprise because that's an under the radar thing. There's been rumors that Lucid would or would not build in Saudi Arabia, and those rumors were persisting all the way up through the second quarter call. Are they building? If so, where's it gonna be? How many cars are they going to be able to build, and so on and so forth. And now they come out yesterday and said, "Oh yeah, we are building. In fact, we're done. We're gonna start producing cars in the fourth quarter, and we're gonna be able to produce about 5,000 cars a year to start with. And once we're ramped up, we're gonna be able to produce 155,000 cars a year out of our Saudi Arabian factory."
Amazing.
It's already done, and that's just kind of taking people by surprise. The Saudi government, as you would expect, gave a lot of incentives to Lucid to build in the kingdom.
Right.
And so I don't know how much Lucid actually ended up spending to do this. The Saudi Arabian government has a huge incentive to try to diversify from oil, and they want to diversify. One way is electric vehicles, and Lucid is kind of the horse that they've decided to ride for that. So there's that. That's causing kind of a buzz in Lucid. I don't know if it's being taken positively or negatively as of yet, although the Lucid stock has been up the last couple days now. Finally, Fisker came out just yesterday, and they're starting to talk about deliveries. Fisker, of course, doesn't have a manufacturing facility. I don't know if you knew that.
I did not know that. No.
Fisker has 2 facilities that their cars are made in. One of them is in Europe. It's a manufacturing facility that contracts to different car makers. This particular facility makes cars for Ford, GM, Volvo. I believe they make some for BMW, for Volkswagen. They have 30 different models that they will make cars for.
A pure contract manufacturer.
They
though.
are a pure contract manufacturer, yeah. And in the United States, we were talking a couple months ago about Lordstown Motors, and they went bankrupt, and Foxconn they're supposed to be their partner, and there's this whole tiff going on between the two of them. Well, Foxconn bought the manufacturing plant in Lordstown, Ohio, not Lordstown Motors, and so Foxconn is out there looking for work. Guess who's making the Fisker pair for Fisker as a contractor?
Fascinating.
Yeah. So yeah, Foxconn, the people who are famous for making the chips for the Apple phones are actually in the car business making the Fisker pairs for Fisker. And now Fisker has announced that, yeah, they were successful in making 100 cars a day through the last 3 weeks in September, so 1,900 cars in 19 days. And they're in the process of ramping up. In the fourth quarter, they expect to deliver 300 cars a day on average throughout the fourth quarter. That has investors pretty excited because, again, like Rivian has started to do, you're seeing a young EV maker actually make EVs.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of the early litmus test. We at Gruber, I know that sometimes we have kind of a low bar. The first important thing that we look at for our employees, do they come to work every day?
Yeah.
It's not a very high bar, but it's surprising how many employees don't even meet that.
They have difficulty, yeah.
They have difficulty getting to work every day. Well, for the EV makers, it's similarly, it's a low bar. If you're going to be an EV maker and you're going to make cars, are you actually making cars?
Mm-hmm.
And Fisker is now showing that, yes, they are actually making cars. And it's not just making, kind of the Lucid argument. Well, you're making all these cars, but you're not delivering them. Fisker is delivering and planning to deliver 300 cars a day through the fourth quarter, which was going to be about 27,000 cars delivered by the end of the year.
Interesting. Okay. One of the things about Rivian, by the way, they were saying that Rivian deployed its first vans in Europe for a key partner, Amazon.
Mm-hmm.
And in July, Amazon actually added its 5,000th Rivian van to its electric delivery truck fleet.
Wow.
Some concerns from Wall Street about margins. During growth, that's always a challenge to attempt to squeeze any margins. But yeah, looks like...
I can't wait to see, and I don't remember where I heard this. This was a conversation, not a press article. Somebody came to me and said, what do you think happens to Rivian when they don't have that exclusive Amazon contract anymore?
Mm-hmm.
They are the only EV maker that's making these delivery vans, and they're doing a pretty good job of it. And Amazon has this contract with them to make 100,000 vans.
Mm-hmm.
Just in the U.S., how many UPS and FedEx vans are out there?
Mm-hmm.
What kind of commercial market out there is there? And more importantly, what kind of electrified commercial market is there? And we know the answer right now is there's not another maker. Rivian is it.
Mm-hmm.
And they could be making hundreds of thousands of these Rivian delivery vans over the next 5 or 6 years once they get through their Amazon contract.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of so the future is bright, I think, for Rivian. Yes, this is not investment advice. Yes, I own a little bit of Rivian stock.
Unfortunately, I bought it during IPO levels and I've been hanging on to it ever since. So
yeah, that's what I did with part of mine. I bought some with it a little bit lower to help get my average cost of stock, but it's still way too high.
YouTube, Nolvers53 is joining us. Thank you. He says, good morning. Is the reason we don't have solid state batteries for EVs as of yet because of cost availability of raw materials. For any of you interested, this was actually a suggestion from Niles in Denmark. He sent us an email, and he had been encouraging us to view some of Jordan Gasige's videos. And I was amazed once I began to look at them. Here is a YouTuber that has a solid grasp on the various battery technologies, even has some predictions about when they will be released, the timelines, up until 2030. And he speaks quite a bit about the new evolving chemistries, the sodium ion technology, the migration from lithium ion, lithium iron phosphate, and it is definitely a video worth watching if you like that sort of technical, in-depth analysis.
Definitely. In fact, Niles responds to Nolver and says, Nolver, I think cost and stability mostly from the little I know. Jordan Gasigi on the limiting factor on YouTube does have a couple of videos about that.
Yeah, so highly endorse those videos, and thanks, Niles, for sharing that with us and with one of our viewers, Nolvers.
Yes.
Looked like TikTok, iPhone House. Hello from Mexico. Well, thanks for joining us. Are those little taco emojis? I think they are.
I think it's a taco and a burrito. So
And a burrito.
Yes.
You're making me hungry.
You know,
making these guys hungry.
Hello and welcome. iPhone House came to us at the very, very end of the day yesterday and said hello from Mexico as well, but we weren't able to get to that comment.
Right.
And I recognize it because they had the same two little icons next to it.
Mm-hmm. We've got Düsseldorf, Germany chiming in. YouTube, Herbert Booter. Thank you for joining us, Herbert. He says Maxus, M-A-X-U-S, China, sells and delivers a large pickup and a range delivery van in Europe, fully electric.
Thank you for that information. I did not know that.
Yeah.
Although with the state of relations between the Chinese and the United States, it's going to be hard for China to get any vehicles into the U.S. For the foreseeable future.
Mm-hmm. And here's one for you, Niles. In Denmark, it turns out Kim Gaba Jensen, who is a regional lead at Tesla Europe, he says yesterday, it's a big day. Huge congratulations to the Danish Tesla team. Now there are more than 50,000 Tesla vehicles on the roads in Denmark. He says, when I joined Tesla in 2018, Denmark had just surpassed 4,000 vehicles. In the end of 2020, after a huge end of year, we were just above 12,000 vehicles, and it seemed like an insane amount even at that level. He says now, 2 years and 9 months later, Tesla Denmark is at 50,000 plus and closing in on 2% of all vehicles on the road in Denmark. Remember, Denmark's not that large a country.
Right.
At the same time, there are now 20,000 Model Ys on Danish roads. So big kudos, he says, to the Danish team, and a big thanks to all our Tesla owners.
I love seeing that growth. And, that reminds me, and there's something that we've talked about several times, it seems like, over the last couple of weeks. Concept that Mike Maloney went into in detail, and we've talked about is the adoption S-curve. This S-curve for adoption is not an electric vehicle thing. This is a fairly common business phenomenon that has been measured since at least the early 1900s, when gasoline automobiles and electricity were first adopted. This curve is something that has proven to be incredibly reliable and very similar across other dissimilar industries. So if Jesse can show the adoption S-curve picture, I'm going to just take a minute and go through the stages on the S-curve. There are 5 of them. First, the first 2.5% or so, is called innovators. And these are the people who like bleeding edge technology.
Mm-hmm.
Think Tesla Roadster owners.
Mm-hmm.
They're incredibly passionate. They have the vision of here's what could be, and so they buy.
Mm-hmm.
The next set of customers is going to be called early adopters. That's usually about 10% of the market. And they're people who jump on early. They're the people who see the Tesla Roadster owners and kind of get envious of them. And then as soon as the Model S comes out, they start buying the Model S. Or when the Model 3 comes out, wow, I couldn't afford it. I want one, I want one, I want one. Oh my gosh, there's one that's affordable. They immediately jump on. They are also typically opinion influencers. They're the ones that like to be seen, and so while they're not the ones that are going to be out on the bleeding edge, they're the ones that are going to have the opinions, and they like to be seen in that new technology. Between these two groups and the rest of your groups, there's frequently a pause. The market gets kind of saturated with the early adopters and innovators, and it kind of slows down. And then it starts to really take off. You have the early majority, 40% of the market, people who do not necessarily mind buying early, but they kind of want to wait until the problems get worked out. They're the first major group that's buying to solve a problem. I need cheap transportation, so they want to go and get cheap transportation. Then you have the late majority, and they're people who don't like risk, but once it's obvious that the market is headed in a direction, they're going to jump on to not be late to the game, as it were. And then finally, you have your laggards. The laggards are the people who, in today's parlance, they're the people still complaining about why we all don't have wall phones and they have flip phones.
I was just about to say that. Those are the people that are just now, maybe in 2023, buying a smartphone for the first time.
Yes, and they're very price sensitive. They typically only buy new technology when they don't have any other choice. They're from a technology standpoint, if you're talking technology, they're going to be technically illiterate. They're going to be kind of obstinate because they didn't want to make the change in the first place. And they're being kind of kicked, dragging, and screaming. I think in the EV life cycle overall, as how they're hitting the marketplace in cars, we have already hit that line between early adopters and early majority. And I think that the change, because we've seen it in California and we're seeing it in pockets throughout the world, where we're getting past that early adopter phase, and the EV purchase rate is getting up to 15 to 20% of vehicles or higher. Now here in Denmark, we have more evidence of that. Your bleeding edge people have bought. The early adopters, the first real jolt in that S-curve is coming. So you're going to hear us over the next weeks and months refer to this S-curve. I thought I'd take just a couple minutes and explain exactly what it is, and that it's a common concept, and it has worked. Telephones, internet, computers, electricity, automobiles. I looked through the 20th century and found a little business book that had all these various things. A dishwasher, kitchen appliances, they all tend to follow this same S-curve in almost exactly the same fashion.
Interesting stuff. I can't read Nulver's. Okay. Nulver's 53 says, now I'm getting hungry. He must have seen the emojis of the tacos and the burrito.
Yes. We have somebody in from Korea.
I know how to say that.
Oh, please.
It's
say.
안녕하세요, and it means hello. And then we can reply with 감사합니다, which means thank you.
Cass,
Thank
I
you,
am
Cass.
fascinated. I had no idea you were bilingual and Korean.
I'm not
to boot.
bilingual by any means, but I do watch a lot of like Korean dramas and stuff. And so like this is stuff that I've just picked up. And I know like that's the formal version of it. And I know the informal version, but it's disrespectful because I don't know that person.
Okay. Well, thank you. I think we're going to get more people from Korea now that Cass has identified herself as being able to communicate a bit. Thank you, both of you. You too. Daniel DeWise says, electric vehicles are a joke. Okay. We might need someone to elaborate on that, but, just to give you a perspective here, Daniel, our interest, my interest in electric vehicles is that we need to get fossil fuel burners off the road. The reason is the planet is suffering. And, there's a lot of conjecture and polarized opinions about what's happening to the planet. But I don't think anybody this late in the game denies the fact that there are changes occurring.
Yeah.
It's just cause and effect that we're arguing about at this point.
It is. One of the things that I appreciate here, Daniel, I appreciate that you're willing to put a comment that's contrary to what a lot of the people who are listening are gonna be saying,
Mhm.
because that means that we're not talking to an echo chamber. We're actually talking to real people who have real and differing views. I respect that very much. I happen to not agree with the concept that EVs are a joke, but that's my opinion.
Yeah.
And Daniel, I'm glad that you've shared yours as well.
And Daniel, one more thing. As a car guy, and I've had a passion for cars ever since I was a teenager, and I got my first 1963 Ford Falcon with a 144 cubic inch engine, which was anemic as hell, and all of my high school buddies smoked me constantly with their Chevelles and their Plymouth Roadrunners and all that. Anyway, I love cars. And have had a number of exotic cars, a variety of muscle cars, and definitely enjoy that whole field. I can tell you safely that driving these electric cars is like no other ICE experience. From a performance standpoint, a clean standpoint, how many times have you sat in traffic and you've got exhaust on both sides of you? If you have a convertible,
Sure.
that's even more pronounced. Or like Richard points out, when you're on a motorcycle and those fumes get up underneath your helmet, you basically have to remove that in order to be able to breathe. Electric cars definitely are fun. They're performance oriented. I mean, when have we ever seen a four-door grocery getter sedan outperform Lamborghinis and Ferraris and exotic Italian cars? The Teslas and the Lucids are able to do that. And then literally take grandma and the pet to the grocery store and buy some groceries.
And if you're punching it when you go to the grocery store, grandma is screaming and laughing the whole way.
Good point. But I would certainly like to hear more from you, why you feel this way, and what your experience has been. I'm sure that there has been something that has triggered that response from you.
Yesterday you and I were talking post-show, and that another thing, it just occurred to me. Okay, you drive through Europe, you're going through the Alps. You have a tunnel that's some 20 kilometers long to get you through the mountains. It's a great, much safer way to get through, except for the fact that when you get through on the other side of the tunnel, you have a headache.
Yeah, well, freeze for a moment. Sometimes these tunnels have traffic jams inside the tunnel.
Yeah.
Because Stau, as they call it in German, there's some traffic. Now you're really stuck because, they have fans, they have ventilation, obviously, but
yes.
It can't quite keep up. And like you say, your body has changed by the time you've gotten out of that tunnel.
Yeah, you're having to deal with the pollutants and carbon monoxide and stuff like that. And if you're in an electric car, no big.
No. And, again, going back to COVID, it was an unusual time on this planet. And there was a period of time when people actually stayed in their homes and didn't go out on the roads for a while. And in Phoenix, Arizona, we live in what's called the Valley of the Sun. And we have South Mountain that's about 30 miles south of us here, 30, 40 miles or so. And it's hazy. You can barely see it most days. During COVID, it was crystal clear. You could almost see the shrubs on the side of the mountains there. But would love to see this planet clean up and get rid of the fossil fuel burners. Just to start. There are many other changes that need to be made to heal this planet, but that would definitely be one of the most impactful in my mind.
Most definitely. It's the gasoline-powered and diesel-powered automobiles have had close to 150 years now to really develop their characteristics. Some of these automobiles, you said yourself, they are works of art.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I can still remember driving a 1992 Honda Civic VX. It got 55 miles to the gallon, and it was just a gasoline car. It was just a little gasoline car. So you can't tell me that we can't get more efficient with fuel. with gasoline and with diesel fuel. The problem is gasoline and diesel is a finite resource. The day will come when we will run out.
Okay.
It might or might not
Sorry.
be in our lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
With electric vehicles, we do not have to depend on that finite resource. Or I'll rephrase it. The resource that we depend on is less finite.
Mm-hmm.
The energy coming from the sun is going to last longer than the energy coming out of the ground.
Mm-hmm. Within our lifetimes, for sure. Yeah.
So we have a lot of comments coming on now about this.
All right. There's a comment here from PYGL. KLB says, Daniel DeWise with a great punchline. Yes. Niles is chiming back in with YouTube. He says, with my $20 phone and 24-character screen the size of a stamp, I am a laggard.
Yeah, I think you are, Niles, in that case. YouTube, RC Robinson San says, Daniel, the ICE vehicle is the greatest joke ever played on the human race.
Interesting comment. Yeah.
That's also interesting.
YouTube, Rick's World TV says, drive a gas vehicle up Pikes Peak and then drive a Tesla up the peak, and you'll soon realize which one is the joke. Interesting comment. Pikes Peak, by the way, we had a T0 story. I won't bore you this time around, but the T0 was one of the, in fact, I think it was the first electric vehicle that made it up Pikes Peak.
I think it was
1997.
Yeah, I think it was. So Daniel DeWise on YouTube, coming back, UAW worker here. Pretty sure everything as you know it was shipped via internal combustion vehicles.
That is true.
That's probably true, Daniel. I mean, think about it. Everything coming from China comes through shipping lanes, virtually everything, and that's all fuel-powered internal combustion. Virtually every train that exists today is diesel-powered engines.
Mm-hmm.
Virtually every semi, every tractor trailer, every delivery vehicle, with the early exception of these very few Teslas and Nicolas and Rivians, they're all internal combustion engines as well. So I think, Daniel, you've got a good point there.
Yeah, I've got a story there. The world traveling Roadster, Rafael de Mestre's car that went around the world in 2012 solely on electric power, then went to a museum in Munich, got stored. Hundreds of thousands of people came to see it. They asked for a 6-month extension, and the car got bricked. The battery died, in other words. So the owner decided to send the car to us and to Tesla here locally for a battery replacement, the main battery replacement. So it left the port in Hamburg, Germany, on a clipper ship, because this customer is very much focused on emission-free transportation. It took him quite a while to find a sailboat without any engine in it that could deliver this car and had a hold big enough to store the car on the way across the Atlantic Ocean. He gets here, or the ship gets here, and because of unfavorable winds, it was circling Cuba for a while until the wind shifted sufficiently to where he was able to get it to Miami to the port. Now it had to go overland transport to us. Now this was the end of last year before Tesla had their electric semi available. And it killed him to have to ship this car, which has never really done any kind of emission-free transportation, across the U.S. on a diesel transport carrier.
Right.
But he was so committed to keeping it emission-free, his travels, that he drove all the way from Phoenix back to Miami, the starting point in the U.S., to continue his journey. He didn't just continue from Phoenix. But yeah, you're absolutely right. Some of the transport at this point is still fuel-based, fossil fuel-based.
I think the point, and we're going to get to this in our comments as well, that's our commenters are saying the same things. Are we going to look at the status quo and what we have today and what we have had over the last about 100 years? Or are we going to look at the potential of where we're going to be going in the future? Do we have a choice in the status quo? And I'm going to contend that yes, we do finally have a choice. for the first time in over 100 years. And and I am in that early adopter area. I want to see that choice go forward. I think there are good alternatives to what we have. So with that said, Roger Starkey on YouTube says, hi all, what we're seeing is not just electric vehicles, it's a multi-generational industry-wide disruption and probably the greatest opportunity of the century if our governments grasp the nettle. And I do mean all industry, not just transport.
That's a big if, Roger.
It is indeed, yes.
Yeah, that is definitely a big if.
Daniel DeWise, YouTube, comments, entire economy depends on ICE vehicles. Currently, that is absolutely correct, yes.
It does. And Roger Starkey's reply to Daniel is to say, Daniel, not for long. We don't know how long it's going to be. I could see in my granddaughter's lifetime that ICE vehicles would still be a portion of what we do in our economy. But I could see also that in her lifetime, that by the end of her life, the internal combustion engine vehicle has largely gone the way of the steam engine, where it is a specialty thing, where it gets used only in very specific circumstances, where that ends up being the most efficient solution to the problem at hand.
Now, YouTube EV fan says, and he's addressing, of course, the comments that we've been getting regarding ICE vehicles, and he says, "Yeah, for now, the future will be different, and people like you, being slaves to the UAW, will be able to work for clean companies like Tesla that already pay double what you make." Well, let's put that in perspective for just a moment. Elon actually invited the UAW out to Tesla and said, yeah, try to organize, go for it. Our people make more than what you're able to pay.
Right.
They never took him up on that offer. And this was in 2022, actually. Without splitting hairs here or attacking either side, which is unnecessary, there are skilled auto workers. And, you can work for a union, pay your union dues, and then suffer these, strikes, and or work for some of these clean companies. I think that the new EV manufacturers are going to fight hard to keep the unions out of their shops or just out of their plants. If you remember in the last century, there were a couple of things that they blamed us losing our position in the automotive market. Detroit was it. I mean, that's where most of the cars came from in the U.S.
Sure.
And they dominated for a long period of time. Then we had the OPEC gas crunch crisis. And suddenly the Japanese cars started to come in, the fuel-efficient cars. And the unions continue to do the same thing they're doing now, which is make great demands on a manufacturer that was already under attack. So we've already replayed this once before. This is the worst possible time to attack a ICE manufacturer when they're attempting to transition. They're weakened at this point, and they're attempting to transition into EVs. And if they make it, then we could talk about increases and all of the rest of that. But again, as I had pointed out in previous podcasts, evolution has taught us that if a parasite kills the host, all bets are off at that point.
True. At the same time, and can't believe I'm about to say it, but
Go for it.
I'm going to, because I believe it to be true. Tesla probably wouldn't be paying an average hourly rate of $59 an hour to their auto workers if the UAW didn't have the rate that they have right now today, even before this negotiated contract with the big three automakers.
So you think they're applying pressure, and that's the reason the wages are so high. Of course, California also contributes to that.
Yes, California will contribute to that. But the wage scale set before Tesla even existed helped to define the type of wages that Tesla was going to need to be able to pay to get their assemblers to work. There's no question that Elon, and I agree with the idea, I've seen too many people that have made millions by being able to be that Tesla employee who has the opportunity to exercise stock options, and they do exercise them. And the next thing you know, they're millionaires and sometimes multi-millionaires, and they're retiring young. So I get that. That's totally there. But for those people who decide they want to trade dollars for hours, they're trading $59 for an hour of work on average.
And when you have an employer that pays above union scale, game over for the union.
It is.
And I think another thing that's going to contribute to maintaining that, or which could be, again, the final nail in the coffin, in the coffin for unions, is the fact that these kind of marketable skills are going to be in great demand, that EV factory workers, there's going to be a shortage with this massive transition and this disruption that is occurring. Unions are going to become irrelevant. They're not necessary anymore. I think that the market conditions are going to drive the wages higher than what the unions could ever demand.
I absolutely agree with you there. I believe it was Sandy Monroe when he was on several months ago, and we've used this example several times now. His grandfather was a steam engine mechanic. He earned good money as a steam engine mechanic. And in the early 1900s, he was out of work and unable to find work because there were no more steam engines. We had transitioned from steam to diesel. And diesel was the new thing. And diesel was kind of where it was at. And he was not an early adopter of diesel. So all of a sudden he found himself out of work. Is that going to be what happens to many of these auto workers? I hope not, because the skills are more similar between electric vehicles and ICE vehicles. But at the same time, anybody knows reasonably that it takes less time to put together something that has 20 parts than it takes to put together something that has 2,000.
Right. We're probably getting a lot of questions here and comments. YouTube, Rick's World TV says, at 50,000 miles on my Tesla, I've saved $1,000 in oil changes alone. Yes.
Yeah.
We talked about that yesterday. And then, of course, you throw in the tune-ups and, the spark plugs and, all the rest of the maintenance that goes into an engine and transmission. And
yeah. Daniel has another comment for us coming back where he says, lithium is not infinite, neither is cobalt. And I'm reinterpreting this a little bit because he said it's not finite, which would imply that it was infinite. But I think his meaning was lithium is not infinite, neither is cobalt. That is true. Lithium iron phosphate batteries don't have cobalt in them at any meaningful level. Sodium ion batteries don't have a meaningful amount of lithium in them.
table salt.
It's largely table salt. We were talking about graphene batteries coming into the marketplace once the engineers and research can figure that out.
Carbon, the most plentiful
And
element
cobalt's
on
not
Earth.
in there at all. Cobalt is not in the new Tesla batteries and will not be continuing at all.
Okay, so
But the point, Daniel, is the technology is improving rapidly. And that's typically what happens when you have demand, innovation kicks in.
yeah,
And new technologies emerge. So personally, I'm not concerned about, shortages of a particular mineral that we may currently be using in a battery technology that will be obsolete within the next few years.
I agree. RC Robinson San on YouTube says GM, not only did they killed not only the EV, but the electric trolley. Yeah,
That was an oversight. I just had a customer actually in Colorado that sued GMAC when they attempted to retrieve his EV1. He was unsuccessful. They all wanted to keep this little electric vehicle. And it was, a novelty. It was a joy to drive. It was inexpensive. Maintenance, was virtually unheard of with a car like that. And but GM had the chance to become the world leader in EV adoption or creating the EV revolution.
they
And missed the
really
boat.
did. It's I think you've even said it before. It's like when digital equipment came out and said, yeah, the ridiculous thought of somebody having a computer in their home. I just don't see that ever happening.
One of the most famous quotes from the CEO of Digital Equipment Corporation, Ken Olsen, was, "Why would anybody want a computer in their home?"
Yeah, exactly. On YouTube, Ranmeth R says, I love your video on Tesla's repair on the battery.
Mhm.
Just wondering, what are you all using to see each battery power that you show in your videos?
To see each battery power, you mean, the software that we're looking at the CAN signals with. It used to be a combination of working in black screen Linux to eventually getting a Tesla subscription to Toolbox, which is their GUI user-friendly version that they use for troubleshooting Teslas. The the independent service organization version and the body shop version, which is comparable to what we have, does not give you all the features. For example, like tuning in remotely to a car and then diagnosing it, at the customer's location. But it is definitely what we use currently. It's one of the best packages that we have so far.
Yeah. Jeff Jones on YouTube says, I am still trying to wrap my mind around EVs and the sun. So EVs use the sun? I'll start with the answer on that. Absolutely, EVs can use the sun. Here's how I do it. I have solar on my house. My solar system generates energy, and instead of selling it back at wholesale to my power company, I'll plug my electric vehicle in somewhere between 9 and 10 in the morning. So my solar panels are now powering my EV or charging my EV battery. So my EV is using the sun.
Yeah, so it's a photovoltaic conversion from DC to three-phase AC or single phase in the case of a homeowner, and the ability to charge your car.
Yeah, pretty
store
much.
it.
And and it's very much that pre-early adopter phase of the S curve, but there are more and more places where homeowners are buying things such as a Tesla Powerwall or some sort of other stationary battery storage system, where they can then, instead of selling electricity back to the government, either they can go completely off grid, or they can store that battery energy during the day that comes in from the sun and then use it for whatever they want, including charging their car.
Now, EV Fan on YouTube, he brings up an interesting point, and I'll elaborate in a moment here. He says lithium will be phased out within this decade. Cobalt is already entirely phased out due to the new Tesla LFP batteries. But let's not forget, folks, that unlike some of the other, waste that you end up with when things get scrapped, cars get scrapped, for example, these EV battery packs are high-grade ore.
Mm-hmm.
They are completely recyclable. There are companies like Redwood Material, J.B. Strobel's company, that are pioneering this type of effort with what they claim to be close to a 0% waste stream. So everything gets reused. The stainless steel and the casings, the lithium ion, the cobalt, whatever other minerals are available, which of course is a clear departure from the way that we have done our scrapping in the past.
Right. I mean, even for combustion engine automobiles, you've got automobiles. Say you're driving down the road, you get into a crash, your car is totaled, it goes to a junkyard. One of the first steps of the recycling process is the pick and pull from that junkyard.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people, a lot of businesses will go in and they will pull out all of the good parts that they can, pay it, and get that stuff back in. Overall, from beginning to end, the recycling stream for combustion engine automobiles is believed to be at or slightly above 90%. Great. I appreciate that we can do that here in the States. 90% is not 100%.
Mm-hmm.
And on electric vehicles, the critical components, the battery is really the big thing, is going to be between 98 and 100% recyclable. We see that today.
Mm-hmm. Good point. YouTube, RC Robinson-Sand says internal combustion vehicles were made with electric motors and electricity. Good point. All right. Some of that was involved. You're absolutely right.
Yep.
YouTube, Mick Sad King says, big hello from Kuwait. It's Anwar. Good morning, Mr. Gruber. Well, thank you for joining us, Anwar. Yeah.
Good morning, and good evening to you. It's actually almost midnight in Kuwait, so Glad you joined us.
You want me to do that name?
Yes, please.
Yeah, YouTube. Combination, actually, it looks like Spanish and German. Ernesto Glücksmann. The UE is an umlaut U. And since he probably couldn't type, or these guys couldn't type an umlaut, that's how it ended up. Anyway, battery-operated cars have existed since early 1900s. Correct, yes. It's not new. It's just delayed technology. Also, they are safer by order of magnitude. I've been in car crashes with engine blocks ripped off the car chassis. EVs get pushed, but they don't rip in half.
Ernesto has a great point about electric vehicles. You know, we've talked about this at some length in the past. The death of the early EVs largely was due to Henry Ford.
Mm-hmm.
He made a vehicle that could do everything that EVs could do, and he did it for 1/3 the cost.
Yeah.
And so why would you spend almost 2 years worth of wages at the time to get a very wonderful, luxurious electric vehicle when you could spend a few months worth of wages and get a Model T? Honestly, more importantly than that, Ford at that time was the first company to introduce the monthly payment plan.
Really?
So if you were going to get your electric vehicle, you had to figure out a way somehow to get all that money up front. So you had to get your $2,800 up front.
Right.
And for Ford, for the Model T, which was $600, they may let you pay that $600 out at $50 a month for 12 months.
So he started a investment or a... oh, that's interesting. I did not know that. Yeah.
He's one of the first ones that did it.
Yeah, that's a brilliant move, actually, because that's quite a big expense. I mean, $2,800 100 years ago was, an
It
ungodly,
was
princely sum.
well over a year's worth of wages.
Yeah, easily. Looks like YouTube. Rick's World TV says, I track my costs, and my Model 3 has saved me $6,500 in cost. We don't know over what period of time that was. It's probably more than a year, but again, $6,500 is a significant portion of the cost of that car. Yeah.
Yeah. So Daniel DeWise, next comment he has is, where's the lithium and cobalt mines going to be? Are they going to use fossil fuels to operate those mines? Lithium mines are a lot of them in South America.
Brine ponds,
Bolivia. There are a number of them in Africa, especially in the Congo. Some of the largest lithium deposits in the world are either in Australia or right here in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
Northern Nevada by Reno has made the news because there's an ancient volcano caldera that has ore that is such high grade. There are different names for the different grades of ore. Usually you get your low grade ore and you refine it into a higher grade, and then you refine it. It's a 3 or 4 step process. And the ore that's potentially going to be able to come out of this Nevada mine is the second step up natively in the soil. And it's I'm not sure if it's ever been seen on Earth at this high of a grade.
Interesting. And the other thing, 100 years ago, people weren't concerned about this planet's health or Go Green initiatives. We didn't have the problem. With the few ICE cars that were on the road back then, it was not an issue. YouTube Sailor X72 says, many people don't understand that when ICE cars came out over 100 years ago, there wasn't a gas station at every corner and roads all over the place. Good point.
Yes.
It took years to build all that or that infrastructure. It's remarkable what Tesla was able to achieve within a decade, which is removing range anxiety almost completely with multiple charging options all over the world at this point in time.
Yes, definitely. Ed Prelitz has joined us on YouTube, and good morning, Ed. He says, wait until the hackers start hacking supercharger stations and the disruption that is going to cause people to it's going to cause 2 people dependent on electric vehicles.
Yeah.
I honestly, Ed, I think some of that happens today. I don't think it's on Tesla's network, but I think there are networks that have issues. The same type of card skimming, card swiping type of technology that exists on ICE gas pumps exists in some electric chargers today.
You know, fortunately, the technology of these charging stations is very low tech, and there's not a lot of high tech involved in that. It's basically a power supply that converts AC to DC.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're good point. We look forward to AI eventually beginning to control the ability of hackers to be successful.
Yeah. Roger Starkey has another comment for us as well that I think I'll go ahead and take in this case. He's talking about the S-curve. He says we should note that there is a double S-curve, the EV curve rising, but also a mirrored ICE curve declining at roughly the same rate, which doubles the rate of change. Roger is exactly right. I didn't highlight that not only is there the one S curve that goes up for EV, in this case for EVs, but regardless of technology, for every curve that goes up, the technology that's being replaced goes down at roughly the same rate.
Actually, Mike pointed that out, I think, with toasters or some sort of an appliance.
Yes, he did.
Yeah.
He did.
YouTube, Ernesto Glücksmann says, yes, the UAW is making a massive mistake with timing. And you know, there's another labor union that made that same mistake just months ago, and that was a Hollywood writers' strike. Here we have the AI beginning to take over fundamentally script writing and writing, period. And these guys decide to focus their employers on alternatives. That was a strategic mistake, I believe.
I think so as well. They had. I know the writers are coming back to work now that the union's going to be voting on the tentative agreement. They're delaying the inevitable.
Yeah,
it's
speeding it up actually.
And in many cases, I think they are too. Instead of the studios waiting to see whether or not AI will be successful, the studios are saying, oh my gosh, those guys are so afraid of AI. There must be something good in it that we didn't see to start with.
You know, they used to call the humans that would show up to replace union workers that were striking scabs. In this case, you could call AI scabs, I suppose, or a scab function.
I guess so. Richard Flanke on YouTube joins us and says the big EV elephant is a low-cost, affordable EV in which consumer can operate for $10 a week and it would last for 50 years. It's coming. Elon knows how to make it. And when the low-cost EV hits the market and the pragmatic buyer enters, game over. Just take a look at the Kodak scenario in digital cameras. That's another great example of an S-curve. The company sold assets for pennies on the dollar. Kodak was slow adopting. They didn't think, even though they invented the digital camera, they didn't think the digital photo was going to go anywhere. And then when that adoption hit, they were caught. They were caught behind the eight ball. They went bankrupt.
Yeah. YouTube, Roger Starkey, regarding wages. He says, the irony is that Tesla workers are living the union, socialist, communist ideal of owning the company through stock. That's an interesting viewpoint.
It's, I agree that it's kind of ironic because when you think about it, the whole theory of communism is that everybody shares ownership and nobody has only their own little slice that they're only responsible for. Everybody works together in a collective community to produce the goods, the services, the food, everything that they need to live, and everybody will then pull out of that community only as they need. And a company where all of the employees own all the stock is almost exactly that.
Right.
So yeah, you're right. It's ironic. I'd never thought of it that way.
We have a great audience.
Yes, we do.
Coming up with
Speaking of which, we're running out of time. I don't know if you want to do a lightning round on these, but we have a lot of questions still.
Yeah, let's just go through
let's
them.
just keep going.
Instagram, Monocon 2074. Hello, sir. How are you doing? We're doing fine. Thank you. YouTube, Daniel again, DeWise. He says they do not pay $59 an hour at Tesla, maybe with benefits.
We got our information from the Austin Business Journal. We are only relaying what we have seen in the press ourselves.
And California may be higher because Austin is not California wages. So,
That's correct.
Elon himself said that there are millionaires that work on the lines.
well, that's
In
the
the
stock
factories.
options. Yeah, the ones that have
Yeah.
exercised stock options.
Right, it's not that maybe the average, but like even I would imagine Farzad is another one. He worked there as a product manager for a few years, and now he's basically retired and just running a social media.
Yeah, we did
You
the
know.
math one time, and the original people that had stock options, I think it was 40,000 shares. Had they exercised their options and hung in there, they would have a couple $100 million in the bank today. They
Yeah.
didn't need to go to work anymore, which is one of the problems that Tesla had. They flushed out some good people because what's the point in driving through rush hour traffic to get to Fremont to go to work when I've got 200 million parked in the bank?
Yeah, I can cash out 10% of my shares and get my $10 million and retire. And
Right. Facebook, Anthony Venditti. Hey guys, got a question pertaining to my 2023 Model Y. In my opinion, this car loses a lot of battery power as this car sits idling. I had a lot of times where I wait in my car, like 30 minutes a day, just sitting in my car listening to the radio, etc. I will easily lose 30 to 40 miles of range each day and have to sit and wait. Would you say that is normal? I use minimum power options in the car as I'm waiting. My question there would be, are we heating inside the cabin? Are we cooling? Is it hot outside? What else is being used besides the radio that you mentioned?
yeah, because I can speak from my own experience driving a Model S and being teased for trying to cool all of Phoenix in the summertime.
Yeah.
If I have my Model S parked out in a parking lot, not plugged into charge, and I leave my AC, the cabin cooling on while I'm away, I might lose 20 or 30 miles in 8 hours.
Mm-hmm.
But I figure, okay, that's probably about normal because I'm running air conditioning inside the car for 8 hours. The car that I currently drive is not the only one I've done that with, and it's not the only car that I've seen that's about the same mileage I've seen on other cars too.
Mm-hmm.
Anthony says slight cooling.
Slight cooling.
Okay. POIGKLB on YouTube. I don't think comparing UAW with a parasite is going to change any minds.
I think you're right. I think the minds are pretty much made up. And
Yeah.
that wasn't my intent, by the way, but I found it an interesting analogy because from my viewpoint, evolution has taught us that you want to keep the host alive.
Yeah.
And I think there's an existential threat. I don't think anybody disputes that with these auto manufacturers before the UAW strike. We're not sure they're going to make it.
Yeah.
One other thing, real quick, on the Model Y, you might check with Tesla if it's having some serious issues, but you can also look into camp mode. Now, I don't know if that works if you're necessarily like sitting waiting in traffic, but the Tesla camp mode is supposed to maintain the set cabin temperature when you're camping, for example, and it says that it's supposed to drain 1% an hour.
And this from a guy that has not converted over to Tesla yet.
Well, I've
He's
been
got
looking
Tesla
at
people
I've been
all
looking
around
at the
him.
Model Y for a long time. I want one, but yeah.
Oh, you do want one. Okay.
Another one from PYGKLB to Daniel DeWise. He asks, is it true that workers at the legacy autos have all the overtime that they want? Or do their hours vary greatly week to week? That'll be a good question for him.
Yeah. Richard Flenke, YouTube. He says, Pete, I saw your short on the battery bunker and the solid copper bars running the DC to DC converters. Any data on the power losses and resistance? We found solid bus bars quite a negative draw at EVTV. What that's about, Richard, is we're in the critical power business, and there are a number of blue scrapping bins outside this building that run about 100 feet or so. And not every uninterruptible or critical power piece of equipment makes it back out in the field, so some of it gets scrapped. And what we do is we render it all back to basic, metals, copper, aluminum, brass, steel. And when I go past these bins and see these beautiful copper bus bars, I'm thinking to myself, sure, we're going to get $2 a pound or whatever for those, but there's a lot of work that was put into this, and they're beautiful to me, at least. So I salvage this stuff and repurpose. These bus bars are so thick, they're good for 200 amps. It's the same size that we have in our circuit breaker panels. So the 50 amps that we're going to run through that, worst case, which probably never reached that high, I think is sufficient to handle the 50 feet or so of power that we're going to be bringing down that bench. But yeah, thanks for noticing. This weekend, we're going to work on putting the DC to DC converters in place. And it's exciting creating special tools like this in a new technology, EV repair, and becoming basically the pioneers for this type of work.
Definitely are. On YouTube, PYGKLB asks, I'm trying to figure out how the proposed 32-hour work week would work out. Is it 7 distinct shifts a week? Daniel does have an answer for that one, where he says, my plant is 48 hours a week, Monday through Saturday for production. Some departments will offer overs or unders. They're using 32 hours per week as a concession to get something else.
Okay. So
Wouldn't be surprised at that at all.
Yeah, yeah.
On YouTube, MPTube 2010 says, does that void the battery warranty of using EV power the house and then vice versa? Kind of depends on the nature of the electric vehicle, but because some vehicles have vehicle to grid, so you can run power from the vehicle to your house. In those cases, it does not void the warranty. In other cases, I don't know how you would power a house from an electric vehicle.
Well, vehicle to grid.
Yeah, that's the only way you
when
can
it's
do it.
bidirectional.
Yeah, it's either built bidirectional or you're just not capable of doing it.
Right. YouTube, Roger Starkey says the other advantage of EV cell recycling is that it can siphon up all the small appliance cells, which generally do go into landfills. Yeah, your toothbrush, your shaver, for example. Yeah,
laptops, cell phones.
Yeah,
true. That's where 95% of the cobalt that's mined goes. Is to those electronics.
And by the way, Redwood Material accepts all of those.
Yeah,
toothbrushes, appliances, all that. He continues, Roger, he says, they can also accept printed circuit boards containing gold, silver, etc. It always amazes me, and one of the bins that we have out there is a bin full of circuit boards with pins on that, edge-connected pins, which are gold, 24-karat gold. There are companies that actually cut those off. They put them into chemicals to render the gold back to gold oxide or to liquefy it, and there is a substantial recovery for those types of boards if you have enough of them.
Yeah, it's a pretty good market. I've heard of as much as $20 to $30 worth of gold per board can be recovered at times. Amazing,
yes. YouTube, MPUtube 2010, he says, I see a lot of pick and pull parts still on very old cars, so that 80 to 90% recycling is very generous. Just saying.
Well, it's not just pick and pull, remember. These cars will go to a crusher, and once they get down the metal, they'll go to a crusher, and then that metal will be refined and put back into steel and parts for new cars.
I worked with a buddy of mine in Canandaigua, New York. His dad had a junkyard, and what we used to do was with a big front loader with jaws on it, we would pick the cars up and then flip them upside down, and then we would, with propane torches, acetylene was too expensive, with oxygen, we would cut out the various types of metal. And there was a lot of recovery there. There was cast iron, which fetched, one amount. Then there were alternators and starter motors, which had a little bit of copper in them that you got a different level for. And then, of course, the steel. So, there's definitely some recycling going on, even with that older technology.
Yeah. Crunch to Grace Hopper on YouTube. To Daniel, he says, legacies and UAW only allow management access to stock and options versus Tesla that gives the workers themselves 15% discount on stock options. It has enriched many Tesla line workers.
Well, again, it's a smart employer. that realizes that it's more beneficial to take good care of your employees beyond what a union could do, rather than suffer with having to deal with a union and strikes and
Well, and if the employer is using that stock, they're strategically using the stock to help capitalize their employees.
Mhm.
Now the employer is not spending cash; they're spending equity. For an employer who might be cash poor because they're trying to grow, what a great way to grow.
And as you and I both know, when you give employees a sense of ownership and investment, that pays off huge dividends.
Most definitely. I think that next one's for you,
Crunch Grace Hopper.
Ernesto.
Oh, Ernesto Glücksmann. It's just because you can't say the name.
Yeah.
I get that. I'm impressed with your pronunciation. Great show. Thank you, Ernesto.
All right, guys.
Thank you.
We still have quite a few questions. If you want to save these for next time, it's up to you guys.
Let's take a look. PYGLKB says Tesla invites hackers to try to break into their equipment. You know, they go further. They pay hackers to break into their equipment to, test it and make sure it's working.
Yeah. And then he says SpaceX gets that for free from Russia.
Good point, yeah. R.C. Robinson Sand says, Big Oil is my biggest fear. They know I'm not swiping my card at Sunoco anymore.
Yes, most definitely. How many more questions are we looking at here, Jesse? Is it pages or is it just a few?
You know, how deep you want to answer the questions, but there's probably another 8 questions, and then there's still some coming in. We've just cut off taking them in.
Okay.
Let's do this then, yeah, because we're at 11:30. We will handle these questions the next time. If you can join us the next time, it will be Tuesday next week at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Tomorrow we've got our Critical Power podcast, and then Sunday Jesse and I are going to continue with the AI podcast, and it looks like Elon has some really dire predictions with AI, so this one's going to be a good one to join us.
It definitely will. Thank you guys so much for joining us. I want to give a special shout out to Daniel. I love the type of discussion that has fostered in this podcast, and it's made this one of the better podcasts we've had in a long time.
I agree. Thank you, Daniel, for joining us.
So look forward to seeing you guys all this next Tuesday, and take care.